Standing 187 metres high, Seascape will be the tallest residential tower in New Zealand and a magnificent sculptural addition to the Auckland skyline. Construction has already begun, so you can buy with confidence, knowing that you're investing in a world-class development by a well-funded international developer.
Well, that confidence has taken a hit because work on this $300 million building has been suspended and no one knows if or when work's going to start up again. I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly and I'm standing right next to the Seascape building in downtown Auckland. It's impressive. It looks a bit like a black skeleton at the moment, actually. I have seen a few workers around the building, but certainly it looks empty. It looks like really there's not a lot going on. It was supposed to be finished by the end of the year. It's far from that. So what does that mean for those people who've actually pre-bought their apartments here? And there's also worries that this unfinished building could be a potential hazard. So on the detail today, I'm off to talk to Anne Gibson, the Herald's property editor, about what's happened.
This dispute is between the builder and the developer. It's about a number of things. Firstly, it's about whether there was a finish date on the construction. Next, it's about a payment issue. So China Construction wants $33 million from Shundi Customs. It claims that it's reached a point in the contract where it's aimed that, and it says that Shundi Customs is withholding money from it. And so it got this arbitration on the 2nd of August in the Building Disputes Tribunal, and it has twice, it's told me, sought payment from Shundi Customs of that $33 million, which has not been forthcoming, which is why in late August, China Construction wrote to all the subcontractors suspending work, telling them to leave the job.
Work on this project started back in 2017, I believe.
That's when the building work started, but I look back at some documents and it was in August 2015 that Shundi engaged China Construction in early contractor involvement. Very smart thing to do, the builder and the developer working together on the building. And then the contract was struck in 2017 and the building was due for completion in January 21. So it's been a long time.
21, okay. And they've kept pushing it back. Then it was due for completion at the end of this year.
Yes.
Not going to happen.
A long way off that. There's a huge amount of fit-out work. I mean, 221 apartments, but also the cladding has to be put on the building.
So, Anne, this should have been our tallest building.
It is our tallest building people can live in. Sky Tower's 328 metres and Seascape is 187 metres. It is the tallest building which is aimed to be occupied.
Why did it have to be so tall?
It has to be so tall because it's about the views. So it's only a block from the waterfront, and this is an astonishing site so close to the sea in that Britomart area of town.
The striking form with its clear glass facade and its highly articulated megabrace is an ambitious way to achieve the client's aspirations of an unobstructed view across the Waitemata.
So people are up there for the views, for the lookout, for the drama. This will be quite an incredible view. And photos taken from the top by Peddle Thorpe when they were up there for the topping off in about midwinter. They were pretty dramatic.
When you say topping off, does that mean they've finished the top of it?
Yes, the superstructure is up. The building is completed in terms of the construction business has reached the top and built the structure. Obviously, a lot more has to occur after that, but topping off is technically, a building will be open, say, all the way through, but they've reached the top.
I guess like having a roof shout when you finish the roof.
Exactly, it's a roof shout.
Of the house,
that's precisely it.
We should go back a bit and talk about who the players are here.
Yeah.
Shundi, a Chinese company, family-owned.
It's a development business that's got 3 properties in New Zealand, one at Queenstown, this big one, Seascape in Auckland, and also out in East Tamaki where it has plans to build 10 apartment buildings, so quite an active developer.
So how does China Construction fit into this?
So China Construction is said to be the largest builder by revenue in the world. It was founded back in the 1980s, and it came to New Zealand specifically for the Seascape project. So this is quite a big deal. Now, China Construction New Zealand is owned by China Construction 8th Engineering Division of Shanghai. So they're out of China. It's a very significant global force.
State-owned?
Yes, state-owned.
So sometimes you might see, like I Googled the company, you might see China State Construction. Is that the same company?
Yes, exactly.
They are everywhere, aren't they?
They're very busy, but not on other projects in New Zealand. They're not a big force here, but they are on Seascape.
So how do they fit into it?
So basically what happened is Shundi Customs contracted China Construction to build Seascape. So that is something that's very highly thought of in the construction sector, to get an early engagement between the developer and the builder. It often results in a far more successful relationship.
And have they brought in a lot of workers from China to do this work?
No, actually the subcontractors on this job are New Zealand companies, and I've been talking to them. They're very concerned about what's occurred. They're very concerned about the fact that in late August they were told not to return to the site after having worked there for many years. So these are the steel fabricators, the carpenters, the others involved in this, and they're all locally owned firms who've got a lot of people who've been working on that job. So these are Kiwi businesses building it.
Did it come out of the blue that they were told to stop work?
No, not really. I got a lot of communication from people in and around the city and in the construction sector. Started around about May, where people said to me, work on that project has really slowed down. And they then came to me in a more alarmed sort of fashion, saying just a few weeks ago, look, it's stopped. Work on that project has now stopped. So I went to Jeff Ferrenson at Auckland Council to ask him about that, and he said that work had paused on the site.
When did things start to go wrong here?
Well, from the very beginning, really. Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment ruled right early on that plans for the block based on the fire design didn't comply, and so the developer Shundi Customs had to go back and apply for a new building consent from Auckland Council. They had to modify the fire safety aspects of the plans in the block. And then earlier this decade, with this big 5-level basement said to be the deepest basement dug in Auckland, it's certainly the deepest dug right on reclaimed land, and somewhat of a nightmare with investigations and remediation on the diaphragm wall there.
This is Engineering Project Director Nick Gillespie talking to the Herald in the very early stages of the project.
It's got a 5-level basement with a lift pit extending 21.5 metres below ground, basically making it the deepest substructure in downtown Auckland. Minor defects have been noticed in the diaphragm wall construction, but defects in this form of construction are commonplace, both in New Zealand and around the world.
And clearly, getting a structure like this up and finished in time is not easy, in part because of restrictions.
It would have been more efficient to use internal ground anchors to restrain the diaphragm walls, but because negotiations couldn't be completed with neighbouring properties, we had to go down this route of basement construction. So there are a lot of restrictions in Auckland at the moment for construction. Significant constraints in terms of site logistics, especially because we are immediately adjacent to Customs Street East. With the size of some of the concrete pours that we're doing at Seascape, we are only allowed to pour these during the weekends.
And worse was to come, with the dispute between China Construction and Shundi over a $33 million payment still unresolved.
Well, what we know about that is that there was that August 2 decision of the Building Disputes Tribunal, And that was in favour of China Construction for $33 million. And China Construction said in its suspension letter this month that it had, at significant cost, ensured the project had continued to be progressed towards completion. It says that as a builder it's due substantial sums of money which are owed, and that this is a difficult time for everyone who's worked on Seascape.
How much are the backers and the creditors losing here?
Well, China Construction says it's owed the money. Now, Shundi Customs disputes that and has not, according to China Construction, abided by the arbitration ruling in the disputes tribunal. So there's an argument between the two parties about how much is owed.
Is there any connection here with the Chinese economy and the collapse of that major construction company there, Evergrande?
Yes, some people in the sector think that the economic slowdown in China has certainly had an effect on this and on Shundi Customs and perhaps China Construction. And those are the people who coined the term ghost tower, quite a dramatic.
Who coined that term?
Someone who knows about this project and said, look, the potential for this empty, unfinished building to stand on Auckland skyline is very real and a clear and present danger to the city in terms of we do not want a building that tall, that dominant on our skyline, which is unfinished, where no one is working. And of course, buildings need to be finished, they need to be lived in, they need to be run, they need to be occupied. That's what they're made for. And you don't want the superstructure, the steel and the concrete and everything that is in that massive tower to remain open to the elements. It doesn't do a building any good to be like that for any extended period of time.
Well, worries about the potential hazards of an unfinished skyscraper prompted the Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson to call for an urgent floor-by-floor inspection by engineers, so detailed that each screw was checked to make sure that it can withstand being out in the open. On Friday, the engineers deemed the building secure, except for some minor details, including a pile of scaffolding to be removed. But Desley told me the council has no control over getting it finished, and it will be at least 3 months before work starts up again, maybe even a year.
From council's perspective, Sharon, we are a regulatory authority, so it's our role to make sure the building is safe. And we go and check it every month, and I want to give Aucklanders the confidence that is our role. Our role is to keep the building safe and secure and ensure that the materials that are used can cope with being left open for a long time. And of course, to a large degree they can. I mean, buildings like this, they're open for a very, very long time. It's sad, I think, though, that this is a building that a lot of Aucklanders are watching with interest. It's the largest apartment building in New Zealand, and, you know, people want it to be successful. They're looking forward to seeing, you know, the final product. And, you know, the dispute that's going on is something that we're not involved in. But as I said, I want to give Aucklanders confidence that our role is to make sure it is safe.
What other powers does the council have in terms of ensuring that this building is finished?
Look, if, not to ensure that it's finished, but our powers are around to ensure that it's safe. And if there was something that we felt was not safe, we would ensure a dangerous building notice where we can enforce the owner to do something to make it safe. But look, you get it a bit in residential. I mean, construction is an expensive and complex industry. And we've seen it a bit in residential where something will have started to be built and there's some issues and it's not, and it's halted for whatever reason. We don't often see it in commercial, so this is a little unusual in commercial.
Are you worried about Auckland's reputation here?
Is it Auckland's reputation, though? I mean, at the end of the day, this is a dispute between a construction company and an owner. I mean, the outcome is the fact that we have a large project, very exciting project for Auckland, very exciting project for the country, right? And work has stopped.
You can't make them get back on the job. No. You can't make them finish. No. But you can go down there and have a look at it and make sure that it is safe.
And that's our role. And that's what we have been doing every single month, and we will continue to do that.
Has this happened before, Anne, in terms of, a major construction in New Zealand, just work coming to a halt like this?
Well, the outstanding example is the BNZ in Wellington, which stood like a big, steel framework for many years, 11 years, I think. Work was delayed there, and that was a dispute between the engineers and the boilermakers about which role different unions and union members had on that big Wellington building. And then there was the Mangere Bridge debacle, which is quite well known. But also in Auckland, there was one that I reported on back in about 2001, and this was on Hobson Street, and it was a 4-level motel that was being developed near where the police station was at 188 to 194 Hobson Street. And that stood in an unfinished state for an extended period of time, some years. And I think when Bill Clinton came here, it was screened off so that people couldn't see it because it was seen to be a somewhat shameful thing. And, you didn't want the American president coming to your city and seeing unfinished buildings, right?
Is that right? I didn't know. In fact, that's directly across the road from where we're sitting, isn't it?
Yes, Hobson Street. And yes, I wrote many stories about that, and it was a real kind of a lightning rod for comment and, what happens when developers don't finish things. Because, you see, New Zealand is actually very rare internationally. Most of our buildings get finished. Now, that doesn't happen in places like China and in places like Ireland, for example. I've seen unfinished housing estates in Ireland. But see, for us, it's a real shock. But actually, overseas, it's not a real shock. It does happen.
Is it related at all to workforce issues?
No, the dispute appears to be over money. I did wonder if last year's floods in Auckland and the pandemic and perhaps strong winds with such a tall crane up had any effect. But many subcontractors have been on the job, and it was China Construction which employed the local carpenters and electricians and everyone, and it's those 25 subcontractors who are now really concerned. Actually, a few weeks ago, they were concerned because they had tools within the tower. And they said they couldn't get back to get them, but China Construction said that will ensure that the tradespeople can go and retrieve their tools.
What happens to it now? I mean, is there any chance it would have to be knocked down?
Well, I spoke to Shundi Customs about this, and they said it was quite threatening in some ways. They said they were actively exploring all options to ensure the project's completion, including the potential engagement of an alternative construction resource if necessary. So they're sort of referring to going away from China Construction and looking for another builder. And there is talk within the construction industry about whether another builder might come in. Now that does happen from time to time. And I think the apartments at Alexandra Park where Can-Am Construction left is an example of that, where a builder will be in a dispute with a developer, say, look, this is unresolvable, walk away, and someone else comes in.
What about the role of the council in all of this when they give these things permission? Is there any kind of due diligence done?
Well, the council has a huge role in terms of consenting, just agreeing to the plans that were presented to them, inspection, compliance and the final sign-off. Now, I noticed comments on the stories that I've written that people are blaming the council, but that's actually not fair and not true in this case.
You think about the current climate, and we know that the construction industry is under a lot of stress at the moment. So how many other buildings under construction could this happen to?
Well, most buildings in New Zealand get completed. They get done, and thank goodness for that. We seem to have a system where, it's largely down to the Construction Contracts Act, where there are mechanisms in place for dispute arbitration and remediation. And also, if a party is concerned that it is owed a lot of money, it can use legal mechanisms to put in place power that it has to, for example, stop a developer from selling, for example, apartments. So it could put a lien or a caveat or maybe a charging order on the property, and that would mean that the developer couldn't go ahead and sell the properties, which is pretty serious. That stops everyone in their tracks, and that would really force the issue.
Seascape features over 200 luxurious apartments in a mix of studio, 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom plans. There is a unique 2-storey layout in the centre of the building with double-height atrium designed to flood the space with light and frame the spectacular views.
It was you who reported in 2022 that half of the apartments had been pre-sold.
Yes, Shundi Customs has been, it seems to have been very successful in terms of taking deposits. Now, they got consent from the Overseas Investment Office to sell these residential properties overseas. New Zealand residential property can't be sold to foreigners except Australians and Singaporeans unless there's a special exemption, and the OIO granted that for Shundi Customs. So I would imagine, this would be very attractive in China.
But if they've been half sold, these people must be sitting there thinking, what's going to happen? I've already put down a down payment or whatever it's required.
Well, that's a really good question, because that goes to the point of, is there a sunset clause in the contracts for sale and purchase of the apartment? So is there a period of time which they have to be finished, and does a pre-purchaser have the right to escape from the contract if, for example, the project is running 3 years late, as this appears to be? Now, I'm not sure about that. I don't know what the buyers were told about when they would get possession, when the building would be finished.
Because we're talking about very, very expensive apartments. I think the penthouse, $22 million.
Multi-million-dollar apartments are further up, the more expensive, obviously, and very desirable.
The ultra-premium penthouses feature substantial living spaces with extensive balconies and an opulent interior design that marks them as one of the most exclusive homes.
You'd just about be able to see over the top of some of the islands in the Hauraki Gulf from there, wouldn't you?
Have the companies involved, as in Shundi, the designers, or China Construction, have you been able to speak to them?
I've been able to speak to some of those parties. They don't talk to me very willingly. It is quite hard for a Kiwi journalist to engage with the Chinese building sector, and particularly when the stakes are so high like these are. But yes, some of the parties have been very helpful in telling me what's going on, and I do appreciate that.
If there's a money issue here and the company has no money, couldn't they just declare bankruptcy and just say, we just can't pay you and go away?
Yes, well, companies can go into liquidation and receivership, that's right, and it can be at their own behest if they are finding that they are insolvent. In fact, it's illegal to trade while insolvent, so it's actually beholden on a company to declare itself insolvent if it gets to that point. But as I understand this dispute, this is not about the solvency of one party or another. This is about whether there was a deadline for completion of this building and monies that the builder says are due to it.
I see.
So it's over those issues rather than anyone saying, we don't have the money to pay you. It's more about, now you're legally obliged to pay us as of August 2, where's the money? And asking that twice, not getting the money, and then pulling all those people off the job.
What's the next step, do you think? What happens now?
Good question. One would hope that the decision of the arbitration is abided by, and that the parties can carry on working together to complete the tower, and that the settlement of the sale of apartments and other properties within the building occurs, and that people move into it and live happily ever after.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. Thank you to Anne Gibson. This episode was engineered by William Saunders and produced by Gwen McClure. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Ka kite.